The following program is a UWTV classic.
From the University of Washington in Seattle, Upon Reflection.
I'm Marcia Alvar, and with me today is Garrison Keillor. Welcome back to Seattle.
Thank you, Marcia. It's good to come back.
It's a city you seem to have real fondness for.
I come here too often by the old show business formula. If you do a touring show like mine, you're supposed to come no more than once every 3 years. That's an old rule of thumb that people who know better than I do follow. And I think I've come about every year for about 10 years. I think I've done about 10 shows here.
What's making you break the rule?
Well, each one that I do is new, of course, and so that helps. And it is an area that I feel some mysterious affinity to, maybe because there are so many Lutherans here and there's so many Scandinavians.
And lots of ex-Minnesotans.
Is that right? Well, I wouldn't want to hang out with them, of course, because they've abandoned their home state, and I don't want to be with people like that.
But you're one of those people. Haven't you abandoned your home state?
No. I live in New York, but that's not the same as moving away. New York is a temporary place. It's just a bus depot.
Ah, so are you going to move back to Minnesota?
You never know. You never know.
I wanted to ask you, you started out in radio in the 1960s.
You make that sound like such a long time ago. The 1960s, you were.
It was a long time ago. What attracted you to radio? Why radio?
Radio for every reason. I mean, how long do you have?
Take
do you
your
have
time.
Hours? Huh?
Take your time.
That's one thing that drew me to radio, was that you could take your time. You could talk and talk for a long time and be invisible. I think it was the dream of every child that I knew, to be able to talk to people without having to make eye contact with them is a Midwesterner's dream. And to talk to people without enduring their scrutiny, just to talk, seemed so wonderful. It still does.
When you first went on the radio, and it's an odd situation, usually you're in a room by yourself and you're talking into a piece of metal and trying to connect somehow with people that you can't see. Did you invent someone? Did you create your own audience?
Oh, sure, but does that seem odd to be in a room by yourself? It doesn't to me, you see.
Talking
because
into
a
piece of
reader.
metal?
I grew up as a reader, and so to be alone in a room seemed to me the most normal and desirable thing that was possible. My parents used to punish me, often unjustly, but they often used to punish me by sending me up to my room, and to me that was a great reward. So radio was just a continuation of childhood by other means, and talking into a piece of metal, that's not odd. I used to practice for radio when I was a kid by standing in a closet, and where my mother kept it was a Hoover upright vacuum cleaner with a nice curved handle, you know, and it just came right up to my lips. I used to talk into that thing for longer than you would think a child could without becoming bored.
So this was a dream come true for you.
It was just a continuation.
What's the difference doing radio and writing in your relationship with an audience? When you talk to people on the radio and when you write, are you talking to those same people really just by yourself and tapping away or writing?
With writing, you get to correct your mistakes. A writer has really no excuse for for being limp in public. I mean, because you've had every opportunity to crank this thing up and to polish it up and shine it and retool it, whereas you stand on a stage and you make up things in front of people, and half the time it's not that great, but it's sociable, and they forgive you for it. You've done no harm. You've done no harm. The minute you're done, your little monologue is finished, and you do the closing line and you say goodbye. It's all gone. It's all dissipated. You've used up no trees. You've
just a few watts.
You haven't created yet one more, boring, misshapen book, to sit on, clog up library shelves. You just spend a pleasant time with people.
No, that's your perspective from the stage. Sitting in the audience earlier today, watching your show, and having been in audiences before when you were performing, there is a tremendous feeling of goodwill in the audience when you come on the stage. And I've been at concerts and performances where people feel admiration or they feel excitement, but with you it's a kind of fondness that just wells up out of the audience. It's really quite unique.
I'd like more excitement if I
Less
had
fondness.
a choice. I mean, I would accept goodwill. Don't get me wrong. I wish there were more excitement somehow. I always, wish people would throw themselves onto the stage or something, or leap up, and they never do.
Perhaps they will now that they know you want it so badly. You've worked in non-commercial radio, public radios at universities, and yet, almost from the beginning, you've always insisted on having commercials.
Mm-hmm.
Why?
Well, it's an American form, and I love to do commercials. If I get to make up the product and invent the sponsor, then I don't mind it at all. I've never done commercials where people have paid me to talk about a product, but I know commercials somehow belong in radio. I did powder milk biscuits for years, and I did Jack's Auto Repair and all of these things. The great thing about them is that you have an excuse to stop what you're doing now and go do something else. In non-commercial radio, things tend to go on too long. Commercial radio, they chop things off. So I use commercials as a way of pulling a curtain.
Do you think public radio could use more commercials?
Only if we make up the sponsors and pay for them ourselves.
I was flying on a plane from New York back to Seattle one time, not that long ago.
Yes. How was your trip?
It was very nice. A pilot came on the intercom system in the plane and pointed out Lake Wobegone as we flew over Minnesota.
Yes.
That community has become so real to people.
Why not? Did he get it right, or was he off?
No, he got it right.
Oftentimes they're very inaccurate. Pilots tell a lot of lies up in the air. They point to things that you can't even see under the clouds. And
they're just trying to entertain.
Oh, they're
just like you do,
passing
probably.
the time, that's all.
When did Lake Wobegone first appear to you, pop into your mind?
Well, I grew up there, so I mean, when I was a little kid, I walked out the door and houses, people other than myself, other than my family. An amazing discovery every kid makes as soon as you walk, I guess. Young, anyway, to answer your question. That was Lake Wobegone.
It's always been there? Roy Blunt asked you this same question. He tried to get at this same thing once in an interview he did with you for the Farewell magazine, wanting to know about the sort of the genesis of Lake Wobegone.
Roy Blunt? Mm-hmm. Do I know a Roy Blunt?
You know Roy
I know Genesis. I've read Genesis, but I don't. Like Wobegone. No, it hasn't always been there. I mean, but it was settled, you know, in the early 19th century. I mean, but before then it wasn't there. It was just a lake and a swamp and a place where the Indians used to come. That's where the name comes from. Like Wobegone is
Wobegone.
It's an Ojibwe name. It means the place where I came and waited for you all day in the rain. Ojibwe is a very economical language.
Lake Wobegone and you both became very famous. In the mid-1980s, you ended up on...
I enjoyed it. They did not.
Oh, they didn't? Do
No,
they still
not at
hold
all.
it against you?
Absolutely.
You did? You enjoyed it?
Yes, very much. Absolutely.
Because a lot of people say they, you know, they get famous and they hate it. It's restricting, that they feel trapped by it.
Absolutely not. I'm in a line of work, writing and performing, where you have something that you want to tell other people. You're not always exactly sure what it is, but you want to tell other people something, and the more people, the better, because I believe in what I have to say, especially when I'm not sure of what it is. I'm even more convinced of it.
So did you want to be famous?
Never thought of it, because I was in non-commercial radio, and I was in radio. Nobody in radio becomes anything. We just hang around until we're not there anymore. So it never occurred to me.
And when it happened, I mean, did it do good things for you?
Oh, gosh, yes.
Like what?
Oh, just absolutely wonderful. All of these people began to listen to stories that I told about my relatives and the people I grew up with, which were humorous, I hope, but which were also loving, and all of these unlikely people. And there's my bias about the sort of audience that I could expect to find in public radio. All of these unlikely people discovered this show and these stories that I wanted to tell them. People who didn't go to college, and people who didn't read the New Yorker, and people who people like my relatives. So I had a chance to tell stories about people in Lake Wobegone to people who were like the people in Lake Wobegone, and they enjoyed this. It's an amazing thing. I never get over that. You see, if I were to tell stories about Lake Wobegone, a small town in Minnesota, to a New York audience, to a West Side New York liberal audience, I would be tempted to be dishonest. I would. I would be tempted to be patronizing to my own characters, and to make fun of them, and to be cruel to them, and to manipulate them, because the biases of my audience would be all too clear to me. Whereas if I'm telling the stories about the Tolleroods and the Inkvists and the Krebsbachs to people who are very much like the Krebsbachs, it puts me under, I think, a greater artistic obligation, because they know these stories, and they know these people that I'm talking about, and they know when I'm not telling the truth, which I would rather do, given my upbringing.
Sounds like it's almost made you a better person.
Well, I would not claim that much.
Is it still fun?
I think it is. It's fun while I do it. It's not fun before, and it's not fun after. But I still enjoy doing it. I cherish the chance for 20 minutes once a week to walk out on a stage and tell stories to people, which I think is a very dignified and worthwhile thing to do. More worthwhile than preaching is storytelling.
How different is the show that people see now than the show when you first started out with A Prairie Home Companion?
Oh gosh, I don't know. It's been so many years I hardly even remember it. I was so scared. I have no memory. Just panic-stricken. Just a tall, moist person trying to get through it as fast as possible.
It must have felt very...
That's why I want to stay, doing the show for a while, is because the early audiences invested so much suffering in my career. I put a lot of audiences to a hard test, and I still do occasionally, that it wouldn't be fair to those people back in Minnesota to retire at this point,
The first time you told a story on stage, it must have felt very frightening, like you were taking a great risk.
No, it was a good story. It was
shorter.
a wonderful story. I think one of the first stories that I ever told was a story that then I later wrote for the New Yorker, and it was a story about a great train in North Dakota called the Prairie Queen. And it was a story about this train, and it was the greatest train the world had ever seen, and because North Dakota is so flat, it could go awfully fast out there, and they had a billiard table in the parlor car on this train, and you could play pool as you rode along, and people would be sitting there and sort of following all these details, nodding, yes. And the train used to go alongside the Trans-Dakota Canal, and it would slow down to trolling speed, and people would cast out, and they'd get catfish as people accepted all of this. It was a great story.
I heard, maybe it isn't true, maybe it's one of these things that just built up over time, that you came back after doing that first show, went back to the radio station, and somebody said, "I'm not sure you should do that again."
That story?
No, tell a story.
Yes. No, that didn't meet with a lot of enthusiasm, but that's okay. I knew that that's what I wanted to do.
And it turned out okay.
From time to time, it's turned out okay.
Do you feel like you've done everything you want to on the radio? Is there something new you're longing to try out?
Oh, there's lots. There's lots of things I haven't told stories about because I don't know how to do it. People in Lake Wobegone have never made love in a story of mine, and I'd like them to, and I wish that I could. And I wish that I could tell this so that it would be right, but I don't know how to do it. Nobody in Lake Wobegone has died in one of my stories. Well, they have, but I would like, as a storyteller, to be able to tell the story of somebody dying and then follow them afterward, sort of follow their life in the afterlife and carry them on. Up or wherever, or out or down or wherever people go. So there's lots left to do.
When you start telling a story on the show, you're on the stage, do you always know where it's going to end?
I know when it's going to end. I know when I have to get out, and I have a clock that's down at my feet so I can see the second hand go around. But no, sometimes it comes up short, and sometimes it surprises you a little bit.
I listened to a show once that you did, and it's where this question came from, and it was a show you did in Juneau, Alaska.
Mm-hmm.
And I had always felt in all your stories that there was a kind of roundness, beginning, middle, and end, but that one had the feel of a runaway train to it.
It was such a complicated story, and it took place in Alaska, and my aunt was in there, and this couple was in there, and this guy seeking his fortune was in there, and there were missionaries, and there were prospectors, and so on. It had the history of the state, and I was sitting on stage telling this story, and I had laid so many so many little complicated wires at the beginning of it that I had to wrap this thing up, and I couldn't get it wrapped up. And there was supposed to be an Inuit dance troupe that was going to come out and close the show by doing a dance. And I could hear them backstage. They had ankle bells on, and they were moving around restlessly back there. They wanted to do this dance. But I could not get out of this story until finally, I mean, it was 45 seconds to the end of the show. I have been out there for 35 minutes, and I was finally getting this thing wrapped up. And somebody from the staff handed me a note, and it said, "Just say goodnight." And so I did.
I got the feeling I didn't hear the whole story that night.
It wasn't a great night, but when it was over, that was the end of it then.
What was a great night? Did you have a show that you remember as a favorite, as one that really stands out in all the different shows you've done?
I don't think about them. Radio erases itself, I think, when you're done with it, and the shows that I think about, you know, are the ones that are yet to come, and I look forward to them, and I sort of suffer through worrying about them, and then I have a great time when I do them, and then they're gone, and then you're sort of bereft again for a while.
A number of book critics, other people, have compared you with other great American humorists and American storytellers, including Mark Twain, Thurber, Benchley. And I'm always curious about that American humorist or American storyteller, and what makes somebody an American humorist as opposed to a Canadian humorist or a French humorist.
There aren't any Canadian humorists. I don't think there have been any for 50 or 60 years. Somebody gave me a book of Canadian humor by Stephen Leacock, and it's called something like Sketches from a Sunshine Town or something. And they said, "You're going to love this. Oh, this is going to kill you. They're going to lay you out." And I read it without even smiling. There was nothing there. We don't know. We don't know what makes humor in other countries. Humor is particular to us. Deaf people have jokes in sign language that when you translate them into spoken English make no sense at all. You can make puns with your fingers.
So it's just, you have to be part of it to understand it, to get the humor of it?
You have to be an American, and if you're an American, nobody needs to explain it to you. If they laugh, it's funny. If they don't, then it's not humor. If they're American, then it's American humor.
Are you successful?
Sometimes, from time to time. Ever so often, I do better than I have a right to expect to.
I read a quote. It really it stayed with me. You said, "I don't have great success. I don't have feelings of great success. I have feelings of great failure."
It's my upbringing. I grew up in a fundamentalist family, and we didn't believe in success. Didn't covet it, and didn't consider it important. And you never get away from that. I don't have a warm glow from these things. Is that sad? I don't think it is.
No, I think it's real normal. But
Good.
then I'm from Minnesota too. So. So what's ahead for you? What are you working on now besides your radio show?
I'm working on a book which is amazing to me because it's a dirty book. It's turned into a kind of a vulgar book, and it's a lot of fun to write.
This is like there's someone in you who's dying to come out and do this. I mean, you flirt with this in your show.
I had no idea, but I'm really enjoying it a lot. It's full of people with kind of foul-mouthed people who are a lot of fun to write about. It's more fun to write about seedy people than about admirable people. I guess we always knew that. When you write the story of the Garden of Eden, Satan is the interesting guy in the story. If you're a storyteller, you know that.
And a book to look forward to. Garrison Keillor, thank you.
To see more UWTV classics, visit uwtv.org/classics.